I was one of the founders of Media Molecule. Me, Mark, Alex, and Dave came from Lionhead Studios. We were working there before with Peter Molyneux's fantastic games, and honestly, Lionhead is one of the greatest places to be your first game company. It was my first game company to work in. Before that, I had 15 years of a mix of design and art roles and jobs in Egypt, where I'm from. But my first job was in Lionhead. That's where I met Mark, Alex, and Dave. At some point in time, we decided to start up a new company. And together with other friends that we had from Criterion Studios, which was Chris Lee and Siobhan Reddy, all came together to begin Media Molecule. And in that time, a friend orchestrated a meeting with Sony for us to do a presentation of what's, a pitch of what kind of startup we would do. Remember, 2006 is before smartphones, before social network, before Facebook, before anything. Like there was only MySpace. Like the whole idea of users, content, and publishing and having followers, and that these words were not in the mainstream at all. They might have been here and there, but they were not the done deal, especially for video games. So the proposition of doing a social network for video games was just unheard of, like, let alone like a social network for just pictures and like Instagram or something. Like there was nothing. So the proposition at that time, we went, and I remember did a presentation in Sony, and that's how it all began. Then we had a 6 months period where we had to prove do a bit of a demo, prove that it's worthwhile. It got presented, and then these were the beginnings or the origins. So I joined Media Molecule as one of the founders. And one of the visions of us at the time, coming from Lionhead especially, was that even though I was the art director and Mark was creative director and Alex was technical and Dave was technical and Siobhan was production, we really didn't care too much about the rigid lines between roles, and we were quite a flowing startup. The job title importance and these things were not in our foreground of our priorities.
That's fair enough. I can imagine that creating quite a nice, relaxing environment to actually work in, where you're not like strict, like to one set role.
Yeah, I wouldn't say relaxing. Only because I'm not an idealizing person in terms of, I love art, I love creativity, I love rock and roll so much, and the ideal of this world is not ideal. The ideal of this world, because the only people that make the ultimate creative environment sound like a mecca of love and creativity and rock and roll and jamming are the people who've never done it. Like the only people who talk about it like that are the people who don't do art. The people who do it know that it's a very enriching encounter, full of relationships, the good and the dark. That is a very quick summary. So even when you have dissolved lines between roles, that doesn't mean that you will not have challenging days, and even within yourself, because just like even within oneself, one day you're in a mood where, you're in sync with the cosmos and you feel everything is fine, and another day you feel so down and out and things are not working, even though not much has changed. So let alone when you are dealing with other individuals and stuff. So yeah, I think on one hand, not having, what I can agree with the most is not having these complete prescribed corporate kind of specializations is very good for uh, uh, the creative chances. It enhances the chances that good stuff can happen. because when everything is sticking to a formula and format, that guarantees that nothing will happen for sure. But the other version doesn't also guarantee that rock and roll will happen, but has more chances.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'll second that opinion. So the second question I have is how much inspiration came from your previous games and Ragdoll Kung Fu?
So Mark made Ragdoll Kung Fu on his own in in when we were working in Lionhead. That was his baby project, his pet project. And at the time, he he's very innovative, and he wanted to do this unusual way of controlling a character which relied on ragdoll physics. He got some input and help from Alex and Dave and myself. A very small, like myself, I did a few skins for characters, like very little stuff. And he had like a film that he made. It was a spoof, funny kung fu film that we were just doing for a laugh. But he used it as his plot. Uh, and it's interesting, like his style is very organic, you know. He will come up with some seed and then keep building outwards from that, then go back and tune the whole thing as a whole. It's quite holistic. Alex helped him in some rendery stuff, and Dave helped him in some, I think it was like a physics thing. So interestingly, all little seeds of, and I think he helped him in some network stuff. So the interesting thing is that these were all fragments or microscopic elements of what ended up being the dynamic of this collaboration moving forward. But it was Mark's baby. He did the lion's share, all of it, really, and with a little help from his friends. And then he presented it in an indie thing in Steam, and it ended up being the first game released on Steam. Great story, very success story, and it was all his own IP. So it was a very good story back in them days where it was a bit unusual to have the one person game story, you know. That was, and the tools were not still amazing, and publishing was difficult, and platforms were not around, you know. It was all very difficult, and you only had the big companies as the way to do games. Interestingly, it's back to that again. Then Ragdoll also within it, Mark had seeds of customization where you can customize and swap elements from the heads and the bodies and the arms and stuff to make your own avatars. And he loved that because it was kind of a combat, silly fighting game. It helped a lot to have that kind of customization, and it was multiplayer, so it makes sense. But that was in a time where customization as well was on the rise, and it was the thing of its time. And also, he had an editor, a level editor. He never released that, but it was the beginnings of a do it yourself editor that he made for himself to make the game. And then it was decent. So he was like, I'm going to release that at some point, but he never got around to do it. But interestingly, these are all the ingredients that when you go and you think about Little Big Planet, a platformer which has physics as its tactile way, and it has some of the rendering techniques that Alex has mastered at that time, and Mark technically, and some of my kind of influence there in the visual side, and Dave had his own prototype. I don't. I mean, I don't remember exactly because, you know, Little Big Planet a long time ago now, but uh, the processes in which we developed it uh, uh, came from multiple directions. You know, uh, as Little Big Planet kind of found its identity, and by the time Little Big Planet 2 was established, it already had a language, right, of how its tools work and how its menus work and all that. But before that, when you delete the existence of that, you can't kind of rewrite history in hindsight. So I have to take myself back to the before that language was made, and how did we come up with our first levels. So I remember we were really trying to attack it from multiple directions. One was to have we wanted earlier, the very early days, we were trying to kind of have a casual approach to game development. And we were trying to think, what does that actually mean? How can you make people make levels in a playful and appealing, approachable way? So we went first down the very, very gamified approach where, to paint a level, Sackboy would hold a roller and literally animate and paint it. And if you want to burn through or cut an object, you have like a sort of melting gun that you go through and make hole. And we were thinking that if we make all the creative tools a bit like power-ups like that, then they double up as gamey kind of powers and creative tools as well. It sounded good on paper and everything. But when you start trying to make a playable environment only using things like that, you quickly come across uh, issues that you realize that what is involved in making a level is not only carving things in a macro kind of way or a micro kind of way. You have to sort of be able to zoom out to the general, go back to the specific. You need to be able to load and save and group and flip. You created something and you want copies of it, and then all the language that has been established by the world of digital creation and design. So no matter how you want to innovate and do a more approachable blast at these things, you find yourself going, well, I'm not going to innovate on the concept of undo, you know? I'm not going to cancel the concept of load and save and rename, and stuff like that, because it's they're successful ideas. There are some convoluted ideas in the world of creativity that we all human beings try to refine, but there are a lot of good ones that you want to keep. So very quickly we found ourselves going down the editor route. And Mark, in the very early days, went out in his garden and took some videos of that and pictures, because we really felt that to sell this idea of the handmade, crafted world made by actual people that these toys and characters are playing within, it would be nice juxtaposed against realistic environments. So that was the birth of that ingredient as well.
Mark's back garden was the inspiration for the garden's level theme, wasn't it?
It was literally, yes. I think he literally modeled a part of his, because he had a little wall in the back of his garden, and then he closed up on that, and he was imagining the little characters walking around there, and so yeah, he used literally a bit of his garden.
I don't know why, but I find that really amusing. So designing the Cyclops, that's kind of like, so the Cyclops was just to, I don't know if you need a memory jog or not, but yeah, first kind of boss in the game, or at least it was going to be, and then it got scrapped for the collector. So yeah,
Yeah.
kind of just designing the Cyclops and anything really about the early versions of LittleBigPlanet 1 and or 2.
Yeah. I remember in the early days, in parallel with the quest to find the language of the game, and we were still at that point not fully settled on how are we going to approach the tools. There was a eureka moment which came later on, where the level creation uh, 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 approach was solidified, and then we had made that decision that we're going to use the same level creation style that the user will have. But that came later. In the beginning, we were still building this language. So we were still at that point also trying to think about the game that we will make and the ingredients of that. But then there was something else we were looking for, and I remember myself and Mark. I remember Francis. I remember, we were talking about fairy tales and trying to readapt some fairy tale uh, 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 elements into our inspirations pot. We were looking at Grimm brother fairy tales. We're looking at ancient mythology, but reimagined in this kind of DIY world. So things like a cyclops would have come from Greek mythology or my obsession with that. But then uh, uh, we were combining that with the idea of a giant in a Jack and Beanstalk kind of setting. So we were fusing and mashing up multiple things. You have like a Jack and the Beanstalk inspiration from Grimm Brothers that has a giant in it, but we'll make the giant inspired by like the Odyssey Cyclops and Francis. We were also trying to make things in that kind of 2.5D look, emphasizing the materials. So Francis made this design that was kind of a junk made out of junk metal cyclop giant character. So you can see the influences mashing up elements from mythology with elements of fairy tale, with the graphic style and the visual style that is emerging, created that giant character. And the beanstalk was also burst at the same time, the idea that we want to do a beanstalk, but that is made out of springs and wood and joint and metal, and that you can build like a contraption, huge contraption, kind of also inspired by Studio Ghibli's House Moving Castle, I recall.
I I can't remember what video it was, but I watched I saw somewhere about an interview that you said that all of you were working on Little Big Planet, and then you went to go and see House Moving Castle and kind of took some inspiration from that movie.
Yes, yes. We were at the time drawing inspiration definitely from House Moving Castle.
Do you have any files about the game version Milestone 5?
I don't know what Milestone 5 is at all.
So I think it's like a game version consisting of a really early build of a game.
Right.
So it's kind of like
All
it's
right.
I'm not sure, I'm not entirely sure what version it is. I had people, so I have a Discord server, so I have about 20 people, and a couple of them wanted me to specifically ask about Milestone 5.
I mean, I remember the things I remember of these early playable demos is that we haven't had decided on how deep Little Big Planet would be. Would it be like the whole 3 layers in and 5 thin layers came again as a restriction later on? But before then, we were much deeper as we decide on how many characters will be playing. So there were some early demos that had 10 characters or more playing in a Bohemian Rhapsody music, I remember, and they were like running havoc around and stuff. But maybe that is later than 5. And then there was an earlier, very early prototypes of levels, because the notion in the level design was to try to see how much can we get out of just rotating uh, screws and joints and pistons and stuff like that without having the concept of game logic, which came later on. Because game logic is how you get stuff happening in games. When the player gets to this bit, activate this loop. of code, which is going to do a lot of things. And those things, if you do that, it will respond like that. If you do that, it will respond like that. Programming. But that wasn't the gist. Like back in these days, the gist was what kind of game can you only get from bolting things together in a very physical way. Later on, we realized that that was, while nostalgic and cool, it's it's a devil in disguise to think that simplification is actually simple. Simplification, and that's very philosophical now, because simplicity doesn't actually exist in the cosmos. Simplicity only exists when you take things out of their context and then you put it on your operating table and you think by doing that it's simple now. Like taking a blood sample of a human being, or taking a piece out of a tree or something and putting that leaf under your microscope, and but then you find microorganisms in there that are more complex than anything you imagine. But I think the simplicity of the level ended up not being simple at all. Like for a player, for example, a level designer, to do a door that opens when you step on a button, ended up being something that involved a MacGyver-esque kind of contraption. I don't know if you know MacGyver, but it was like, like Back to the Future. If you've seen Back to the Future, the guy, in order for his alarm to ring, he gets all this contraption that makes the alarm ring in the end. So we needed, the level designer needed to create things like that just to open a door. So later on, it was deemed necessary to add electronic kit, and that can act like programming.
What was your favorite design that you designed in the game, and why?
In Little Big Planet, it's a difficult question, because uh, I mean, for example, something like Sackboy was a big collaboration between Mark and myself and Francis, who did the lion's share really, and Dave as well, and then Anton, the guy who programmed it. Uh, so there was a lot of people. So a character like Sackboy is a multifaceted beast. A lot of us were involved. In terms of my own thumbprint on Little Big Planet, I would say I like. Uh, I remember one of my very first concepts I did for this project was called the cherry tree concept, and I drew what became the Little Big Planet logo, that particular tree. And I remember that concept. I'm pretty fond of it. It's a concept that's close to my heart. I think I tried to make it look like made out of fabrics and things, but even the early sketch of it had some of the shapes and forms that were in my mind at the time. It ended up being the logo for the tree. Rex also took that shape and he situated it in the logo, and he did his graphic pass on that, and also did a lot of animation. I remember he would make it all kind of animate, and then the final logo would pop up. And so, the branding of, like I mentioned before, was all in the hands of Rex. But my tree was like, one of my early concepts. I'm very flattered that you like it and you want to put it on your bodies. Very cool.
Moving on to the next question, um, and this is one that's kind of, it's been covered on the internet a fair bit, but I wanted to hear it from the art designer firsthand of what was the design process for Sackboy like?
That was quite amazing, really, because again, it was a collaboration between Mark, me, Francis, and Dave came in the mix as well, where we knew at the time that we wanted to try to make it all fabric and craft based. We wanted a character that is plain enough to be very customizable, but also has a unique identity to them when they're uncustomized as well, which is quite a challenge because, uh, of course, customization again evolved so much since those days, and it become the done deal now in avatars and the whole online personas and avatars is just like the done deal now. But back then it was quite challenging to get a character that in its uncustomized form has lots of character and also can become anything you want from Princess Pearl to a dragon. It can have and we still wanted the customization to look like this little character is wearing costumes as opposed to swapping entire elements and having like a hand made out of like lizard clothes and stuff. No, we wanted it to look like the Sackboy character is wearing artificial nails to look like clothes. That was part of the whole handmade vibe. So the same vibe of the level creation was in the character. But to make the base character, myself, Mark, and Francis were drawing first. And I remember each one of us came up with some bits that made it. Like me, for example, I was very much behind the very pinch joints between the body and the arms, you'd have it like pinched into a small little pinch. And I like that in toys very much. I didn't want it to be like this continuous Care Bears looking thing. I wanted these pinched elements because the pinched elements would also really help add to the floppy and the dynamic nature. I was also behind a kind of posture that had a bit of athletic kind of like feel to it. I was behind the longer legs. There was a point where the other designs were little stubs, like anime type cute little thing from I don't know, Pokemon or something, but I wasn't into that. So that's the my part. Francis brought a lot of the elegant shape to the head and the body, and he's the one who absorbed all the designs and made them coherent and cohere with each other. So Francis simplified and the silhouette to its absolute final, and he's the animator behind all the soul of the character. Mark Healy actually was behind the fabric of the character being the sack material, and that zip on the front of the body was Mark's design. Like Mark really wanted to have a zip. It was initially looked kind of cool, like a zip out of a track suit or something, and that gives a bit of an edge, like a street kind of thing. But also, Mark wanted the a crazy idea that the world where Sackboy creates is inside himself. So he opens that zip and then folds into himself, into his creative, quite a trippy idea. That ended up not being the where you create. What ended up being where you create is the moon, but the zip stayed as a fundamental ingredient and that came from Mark's version. Dave drew some pictures as well, and he was very much interested in the asymmetrical shape where the head wasn't just like a symmetrical trapezium or whatever. It was like more slanted in one side of the head, and that came, I think, from Dave's sketch, and all that got handed to Francis, and then he iterated and made the definitive version of Sackboy. The animation of Sackboy was also a big ingredient because one, you needed this little character to grab stuff, and you needed to grab stuff that is sometimes quite large. So that generated the idea that the hands can stretch a bit in a cartoony way. Uh, the animation as well, because it's a 3D but 2D looking game, so the animation was trying to be quite facing the camera, and this kind of big expressions and things so you can see them well from a distance, and the acting and emoting was a feature that Mark and Alex and Dave wanted, and Francis to push. So this acting on using the D-pad led to what the character looks like. So I really combine the look of Sackboy to all these ingredients that then added up. When you see Sackboy hanging on a thing and his legs dangling, you kind of go like, well, this dangling is kind of a result of the pinched legs and the ragdoll physics, and so on.
It's kind of yeah, a massive mix of all of your work.
I like as well how the costumes always had this rule of, if you're, and we worked with a lot of IPs at the time, which were very humbling for us, like to get big names like Marvel and Disney accepting to have, like, you know, a Wolverine costume or something. Or then we worked with other games, Sony IPs giving us the okay to do a Metal Gear Solid costume and stuff. So we were trying to do all these costumes, but always trying to make them look like the Sackboy is wearing bits and bobs to look like Solid Snake, as opposed to just removing the head and putting a mini Solid Snake kind of, which is kind of obvious, but we stuck to it. You know, if you're a good artist, you consider programming difficult. If you're a good programmer, you consider art difficult. If you're good in both, you consider music difficult. Like, you know, the definition of difficult is what I don't know how to do, but it doesn't mean it's difficult. It means you don't know how to do it, and that's a very different thing. Like, for example, a lot of people will say this: I can't do art, I'm not talented. uh, because the perception is that art belongs to the gifted, the talented. While language, the language that we speak, all human beings, almost all human beings, will speak a language of some sort to get by it, and they learn it in the first 3 4 years of their life. And if you look at a language and you see what's involved in learning it, it's mental how difficult a language is. It's not only a bunch of words, it's nuanced and metaphoric, and it's got humor in it, and it's got tenses and future and past, and it's got similes, and it's all sorts of crazy stuff. And if you start learning a different language, and you see the humor in Arabic is different than English, and people learn that stuff, and you know, and anybody will go and say, hey, I'm having a course in Spanish now, and and they don't have a problem that in lesson two they're not a poet in Spanish yet, you know. While when you talk about the creative stuff, making a video game or making a level or modeling or drawing, or, people will try it for 5 minutes and go like, it's very difficult, it's very difficult, it's not for me, I'm not talented. It's like, we don't do that in anything else in life. Like, we don't have the expectation that we'll have a, one Japanese lesson and become a Japanese poet, you know. uh, but we have that weird very judgy mentality when it comes to creation. Someone will just make touch a guitar and say, I'm not very good, I'm not Eric Clapton, you know. The critical part of the mind uh, is is useful, but it's also very dangerous. You know, if you unleash the critique all the time at all things, you'll never do anything at all. The child, for example, when you look at children and how fearless they are, and how, oh, my little daughter is at awe with everything. You know the word "oh," and she's amazed all the time by stuff, because she's not critical, because she's not applying, yeah, but it's gonna die, oh, but it's gonna this, but this is only the this side of it, but have you considered that and this and that. uh, so that while useful, hyper criticism takes the life out of everything and turns it into a bunch of categories. And are you this or are you that? Very binary category. Are you talented or are you not talented? There are a lot of singers that have crap voices, but they're amazing careers, because they found their thing, and they wrote the right songs that match their voice, and they tell the story that matches their insights. And so yes, sometimes you have a Pavarotti type singer, sometimes you have a Bob Dylan type singer, and they're both great. The point here is, if you want to pursue anything, calm down your critical thinker. Only wake them up once in a while to kind of assess and categorize and stuff, but only here and there, like salt in food. But the problem is that people apply the critical thinker on steroids all the time, all the time, all the time. So of course you're gonna be anxious all the time. You've got a badass critique on your case all the time. No, no, no. But what about this? Or what about that? What about this? What about this? No, no. Forget it. You're this. You're that. And uh, swimming is not the concept of swimming. If you jump in water, you don't find yourself uh, analyzing the idea of swimming. You swim.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, no, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I've never really thought about it like that. I really like that analogy. Oh,
Analogy, yeah.
yeah, that's really good.
Anytime.
What was the design process like for the pod in the game?
Oh, the pod was quite something, because uh, we were also trying to break down the metaphors of Little Big Planet. Like, how is the multiplayer going to work uh, with levels that we've made and levels that people have made? What is that world? Is that world like a Minecraft world, all big, sprawling kind of 3D environments? But then there was a game at that time called Second Life, that was a very, very big simulation, where there was just one big earth that people buy plots of land, and that's it. So if someone took this bit and built their area on it, you can't build your area on that. That area is stick. It's a physical. So as time goes by, that world is a real simulation. You travel through it and stuff. So we were considering, hey, that sounds cool. Let's do that. But the logistics of it is impossible to do levels that you start and have to finish, and they have a core and they have a to have that in a sprawling 3D world just didn't compute. And then so it was a difficult problem. Like, what do we do? What is this world like? And how can we give a sense of a world so it just doesn't look like many little levels that you go in and out? Like, we wanted a sense of a world that you travel. And so it was one of the bigger problems. And a lot of solutions were involved here, to have the metaphor of the planet with badges on them that you go inside and you come outside, was the first solution for the world. And then multiple earths for each person, and stuff. And then we were like, okay, and to travel through it all, you've got your Doctor Who style pod that is your vehicle to the share aspect of this experience. And at the time, we were quite naive in not realizing the amount of things that are needed in searching and sharing. We were imagining that it would all be displayed on a little computer in the pod. Pick friend, which friend, go to their level, blah blah. And we were still. And then once you realize that that stuff is like menu world, it expanded beyond the pod. But at the time, we were thinking that the pod will be where it all happens, and we still, in a way, all the share features happen when you're inside the pod still. So that was its function, but its form went through multiple iterations. I remember the very first iteration, I myself wanted to push a Fabergé egg mentality, like the Russian very ornamental eggs that are fully decorated and stuff. And then we turned that somehow into a pod. And that had a feeling of like, Cinderella's chariot or something. But Mark actually wanted to do it out of cardboard, and I remember he made it manually, made the actual pod in his house or in the studio, and came in with the pod, like, a real made one. And he's like, this is the pod. And we loved it. We all were like, this is super cool, like, do it.
So something that the community has found out a lot about. In fact, we actually, the community years ago, they found out about the beach theme, and then recently we actually they actually got a file which allowed them to export the whole beach theme. Do you remember like kind of a story for the beach theme at all?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in Little Big Planet 1, we wanted to set it up in all around the world, different locations around the world that allows us also to make the theme coming from this particular part of the world that we will travel to. The second theme in the levels was inspired by a seaside in Britain, old shanty, rundown seaside, and that would have given us opportunity to draw from some of the seaside inspirations in the UK. The first one was the English Garden, and that made us kind of delve into a bit of an Alice in Wonderland feel, fairy tales and knights and kings and things. And then the seaside would have given us a chance to go more in a direction of underwater inspirations. I remember that the adventure went under the sea at that point, and we had like, octopuses and attacking ships and things, stuff like that. I remember the environment itself was very finely, nicely done by our artist at the time who was doing it was Sean, a very cool artist. And maybe it is, yeah, I think it was him. And then the levels, they were starting to design some levels under the sea, like I mentioned. And we were starting to build as well the materials and fabrics that go in that theme, and the music. Kenny was sort of doing sort of chanty seaside uh, style seagull sounds, and music that come from these sort of instruments, the wind up. So yeah, there were elements and ideas. I'm trying to remember as much as I can here. And then why did it not make it? My God, that is a question that you can ask any game developer. And especially in Media Molecule, because we tried to make this user-generated content type platforms, but also try to make our own games within that, and try to have a unifying thematic story. But we tried to hit more birds with one stone. We wanted to do our story, generate kits that we can give people as well. So we wanted our own story to have varied enough kits that would be rich enough for giving a community, as opposed to only tailor made, bespoke for this one story and never to be used again. So I think it was deemed like we were running out of time, and we needed to cut corners and streamline. And the so you pick the least developed concepts, and that was one of them. I think at the time it was less developed than some of the other themes.
What was working on Little Big Planet like?
Early days of Media Molecule, there was a lot of overlap, there were a lot of multitasking, there were a lot of collaboration. You'd have like a level designer, artist, like Christophe, for example, is an artist level designer. John Beach is an artist level designer. Steve Big Guns is an artist level designer. Like Naomi was a video editor who became a full level designer artist. Maya was an illustrator who became a full art creator. All the art direction and assets and models and everything was done by one person in Ancient Danger, Kit, in Dream. The overlaps and collaboration between programmers, artists, and designers and musicians and stuff was like some of the best levels created in Dream were done by the audio guys. And someone like John Beach was a level designer, and then he became the creative director now of Media Molecule. That's a very long answer to how is it like to work in Media Molecule, but I'm relating the projects to the what it took to make them, because like if these projects have managed to make one community member become a game development team or two or whatever, like that happened to the people making the project as well. Like they became larger than life, they became larger than their specializations.
And I feel like that's just kind of a nice conversation to have, really. What's kind of your views and thoughts on it all?
Yeah, no, I mean, especially within video games, I think AI is the natural habitat in there, because a lot of programming would have tackled many versions of AI in trying to make non-player characters behave intelligently. And then you'd have AI in the act and processes of making video games, where a lot of things were automated slowly but surely to try to make the act itself, like programming itself. Uh, is a form of AI where you're trying to break down, like engine programming tries to break down lighting into smaller components and then reassemble it all to create a sunset or a lit scene that looks like a natural, Ghost of Tsushima type world. So it is only natural that but of course, the wider human obsession and technology and everything has been inevitable. Like AI was being pursued since the 60s, but there was a lot of missing ingredients. There was not enough powerful processors. There was no data to mine. I think the thing that was the missing link was unleashing the internet for 30 years plus first. So you can fill up this cloud with human stuff. A big, big, big glossary of everything human. Think about Wikipedia alone, or think about every image uploaded. And then you have social networks where people are just uploading their own personal photos and videos and things. And some people uploading their own everything was uploaded on this cloud. You name it, it's there. And you leave that for 35 years or 40 years. That's a very good pool for algorithms to mine from. Without that, the if the algorithms was just trying to use intelligence to recreate all the human stuff from just algorithmifying it all, that would take another 100 years. But because there was all this material already, the algorithm was spoiled. It has powerful processors. It's able just to go through it all and deep learn and so on. So I mean, in terms of its inevitability, of course, since the Industrial Revolution, the or even before, the history of human beings and tools has from the first levers onwards has been an interesting one. My problem has always been in measure. Just like when I was talking to you earlier about the critical mind and the living experience. You know, how much do you analyze swimming and how much do you swim? How much do you put salt in your food? How much do you mix the procedures, pre-set procedures with processes and natural exploration? So the problem I have with technology has always been that it promises to optimize one thing, like the cars allowed people to travel much further and faster and stuff. And as a result, you know, they created roads and they created the cities, and the cities were created as a result of industrialization, you know, and industrialization allowed people to, instead of making one pot per house or something, you can have like churning out of pots, but that led to the factory, and the factory led to the roads and the pollution. And so with everything that you optimize and you get, you lose something else. Like one of the things that humanity lost in the industrialization pursuit was the relationship with nature. And in order for people to go and bond with nature, it has to be like a thing. I like my climbing, or I go for my walk with my dogs. But it's not an essential part of your existence to have 5 hours of your day just embedded in nature. So AI is one of those things that accelerating stuff. So is there going to be good applications for it in all fields? Of course there is. Like, you know, the same way that, you know, we already are in a very mechanized world. It's a very machine-like world. Even the prevailing philosophy of our time is a mechanistic one, which breaks everything and reduces everything down to components and parts and assembles it all again. It's the machine mentality. It kind of is a evolution of Descartes and Newton. But actually modern physics has moved away from that and has realized that in the quantum level, everything is undeterministic, and it's quite a particle can become a field and vice versa. uh, you can't even predict the decay of a radioactive atom, let alone predict anything else. So even physics is gone away from the machine-like thinking, even physics, but not the world. The world is still living in its machine ways. So in that way, I think, like, of course, there is going to be 1,000,000,001 good applications for a very powerful, it's like the most powerful piece of technology ever made in a world that is a sucker for technology, and we all use it. We're using, just to make our interview now, using, you know, phones and satellites and internet, and, you know, so my Zoom and so many things. So I'd be crazy to. You know, I've worked for 20 years of my life making game development tools, you know, and I like technology and I see its place with people. I make music a lot and I learn songs from YouTube, and then I record it on GarageBand on my phone, and then I use this. So there is a, but my one liner is that I care very much about measure. How much salt is in the meal? So how much technology is in the meal is very important to me. Uh, while a lot of business minded people only think about terminology like speed and efficiency. If I can get to the result faster, then I'm happy. I don't measure it. I mean, slow speed. Speed is not only the only factor in life. For example, you don't speed the life of a human being. It's not very valuable. Like, I like my kids' young years, and it's nice. If somebody gave me a pill that would make them 25 instantly, I wouldn't like that, you know? So speed is not the only idea in this world. It's just very valuable for sales, you know. Uh, I don't even need, in art, my definition of art is not the picture or the game you finish with. It's the journey, but it's not only the journey. It's a cheesy thing to say. It's not the end result, it's the journey. I'm saying it's not the end result. I'm saying it's not the journey. I'm saying it's both, but it's also what happens to you and the world around you based on how you do that journey. How you do the journey leads to events and things that create the world we have, and how someone else does the journey creates a different world. So, how you do the journey for that result that changes as you're going. Heraclitus in the old Greeks, pre-Socratic, was like saying something like, "You never put your you never go into the same river twice. It's always changing, it's always moving." And I feel like things like AI miss the point a bit when someone says, tell it what you want and then it will give it to you. Isn't that cool? And then you can tweak that and jam with it. It's like the ultimate assistant. But I'm like, yeah, but sometimes I cultivate care because I've done certain things to get from a point to another. And if I don't do them, then I don't have the care to actually do this thing. Sometimes when I'm researching, I'm working on the painting that you've seen in the earlier part of this conversation. And I've done a lot of research, and sometimes when you're doing research, you kind of go, what's the point, man? This has been done so many times. You get the fears, you get the insecurities, and you go like, I'm not doing it, I'm not good enough, like all this stuff. And then something happens that day, a very laborious, small little task that you've done well enough to give you a boost, and you kind of say, "Oh, it's all gonna be fine. I think I can do this," and so, and then some other times, in the pursuit of something, you stumble upon other things that either feed back into the thing you're doing, or you go, I might do you later, or I might not do you at all, or you make friendships, you make things. I have a very dear friendship with some of the artists that I painted with in my live drawing classes, and some of the models I've worked with in live drawing. They became more of my friends than the artwork we've done together. Like, that friendship matters to me as much as the artwork itself. Sometimes looking at a hand for 5 hours so you can draw it is not about the drawing it that you end up with. It's about the fact that you spent 5 hours looking at a hand. Uh, that prolonged attention that you're putting to a person or a subject, or is very important stuff. Like, so I mean, taking that stuff out in the name of efficiency. And I'm not also, like I say, suggesting at all a binary no technology or yay technology. I mean, it's all case by case, and there are some very good applications, there's some very shitty applications. But the most important thing that I want to say is that the act itself of uh, someone writing about their love of their child, for example, cannot be aided by a ChatGPT, because it's the love for their child. Nobody knows about the feeling I have for my kid except me and my kid. I mean, a thing can write a very nice sounding thing about love because it has access to everything love related, that from Shakespeare to Romeo and Juliet to the all the lyrics of all love songs of all time. And it also knows genres, and it also knows grammar, and it also knows humor, or it doesn't know humor. It actually, humor is one that it can't know, because humor is related to empathy. I can insult you in a way that doesn't offend you because I love you. So that's why you can't translate that shit. Like, that's why the internet is very toxic because it's only relying on writing, and writing subtracts empathy from the equation. While when you're hanging out with your buddies in school and stuff, and someone says something like obscene, but it's very funny, it's because it's almost like, because I love you, I can get away with this. And that's very difficult on the machine, because it's kind of because I love you bit. So I find it quite misleading to think that a very well written article is the same like an experience, and an embodied experience is what is essential for art, and the quest of art and the meaning of art. Like, art is the language of the universe, and it's the language of the implicit. So it's not only about results arrived at fast. That's a very philosophical answer, but at the same time, I don't discard at all having unbelievable applications of AI in video games and beyond. Like, when you go in a world that creates environments for you on the fly based on what you've done in the game. I mean, it's ridiculous to, in a very machine like and very digital like world, being a bit funky about like a very very strong upgrade in that world. It's not as if like we are inserting AI on a world of philosophers. We are inserting AI in a very mechanistic world already.
So, final question. How do you feel about the servers being shut down fully?
Oh, well, very sad, of course. I know that some clever people in Little Big Planet worlds have done almost the same way that people do now, emulators of the arcade games and stuff. Some people have managed to do the same in Little Big Planet and got the game. I don't even comprehend how, but it seems to be happening, so that's good. But yeah, no, my one liner is that sad and not not really in keeping with the idea of, like, I see these things like the same way I see YouTube or Wikipedia or stuff like that. I'd be very sad if somebody said, hey, Wikipedia is the servers have closed. I think, but Little Big Planet, I think, lives on. It has created an amazing generation of creative people that had careers out of it, and found ways of expression and enjoying their childhood and enjoying their and making podcasts and channels like yourself, and more and more and more. So I'm very proud to have been part of that piece of work. Final idea is that it's important to take inspiration from projects like that, to try to pursue being the best version of yourself. But the way you do that matters way more than that goal. The goal of being the best version of yourself is not as important as how you do it. Because, for example, if somebody says, hey, here is a pill that if you eat, you will be the best version of yourself. Well, that's not a very good way of doing it. So how you do it is more important than what it is.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's better to get to the end result through the journey
Yeah,
than
and
just
that
looking
journey
forward.
has ups and downs, just like there is day and night.
Yeah, what's the saying? It's like 2 steps back, 1 step forward.
Big time, big time.
It's really good talking to you. Thank you for today.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your time.
Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you. You too. Bye.